Ready to go.
Mr. McDonald, are you ready?
Good to go.
All right. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Daniel Neff. He's the curator of this living memory, and he's working hard, I know, to keep it viable for other generations. His history tells its tale. Thank you.
So, hello, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This is a photograph of the Fairbanks House from the late 1800s. We'll see some more modern pictures of it later. But the Fairbanks House was built in 1637, and that makes it the oldest wooden structure that's still standing in North America. Yeah. It was built for Jonathan and Grace Fairbanks, fresh over from Yorkshire, England, with their 6 children. They had their oldest was 15, their youngest was 2 when they came over somewhere around about 1633. So they made it to Boston, spent some time in Boston and in Watertown. 1636 they were admitted into the town. 1637 they had their house built, into the town of Dedham, I should say, and had their house built. Why did they come over here? Well, Jonathan, original founder of the family, had a few reasons to want to come over. So he was a wood turner, and he specialized in making spinning wheels, which was a skilled trade. It actually takes a lot of different abilities to properly put together a spinning wheel. Unfortunately, of course, spinning wheels are made entirely out of wood, and the English government had just introduced a new, very high tax on harvesting wood, regardless of use. So they're taxing his trade, like before he can even make something, he's getting taxed. That's not helping. So he and his father did not get along very well. So when his father passed away, Jonathan was left a portion of money but no land. So he's put in the same list as all of his sisters, getting a bit of inheritance, and then all of the sons got land. But Jonathan was put in with the sisters, which in the early 1600s, that's a fairly insulting thing to do to a guy. So he had money, but he didn't have land. And he had a trade where he knew he could make a lot of money off of it if he had the right audience. So on top of that, there's a lot of political and social unrest in England at this time, in the 1620s and 30s. Particularly the Church of England was persecuting people who weren't adhering to the Anglican faith. And so Jonathan and Grace aren't what we would call Puritan, but they are Puritan-leaning. So what that means, to explain that, so the Puritans were a very, very strict version of the Anglican Church. They thought that the main church, the Anglican Church, or Church of England, wasn't being strict enough, wasn't following the Bible closely enough, and that they had a better way to do it. And so the Fairbanks believed in this sort of more conservative version, but they weren't actually Puritans. But it was still enough that they were probably feeling persecuted. And he knew that without any land, and with an overpopulated England, and all this, that his children, his 6 kids, would have no real opportunities over in England. So all of this together made it probably very clear to him it was time to move, to come over here, where there's plenty of land and it was cheap, and people would need spinning mills, so he was going to be useful. So they got to, like I said, they got to Dedham in 1633. In Watertown, they met a guy named John Dwight, and he was a wool comber. So if Jonathan makes spinning wheels, and John Dwight, which are used to spin wool into yarn, and Jonathan is the guy who processes raw wool, they're going to work together at some point. They're going to run into each other. And we think that's what happened. Jonathan and John Dwight meet while they're both working in Watertown. Either they had mutual clients, or John Dwight needed a spinning wheel and bought it from Jonathan. However they met, the Dwights were one of the 30 families that founded the town of Dedham, Massachusetts. So they initially wanted to call the town Contentment. The Massachusetts Bay Colony government said, you can't call it that, it's Dedham. But you can have your town. And so the initial town charter stated that they would only allow people in who were of like mind. That was the specific wording we used. What that means is they only want to let Puritans live in Dedham. So as I said, the Fairbanks aren't Puritan, but they are Puritan leaning, and Jonathan has that skillful trade, that useful, skilled trade. He builds spinning wheels, and as far as we can tell, nobody in Dedham knows how to build a spinning wheel. So there are 30, like I said, 30 families founded the town of Dedham, and the Fairbanks are family number 31. If you look at the Dedham town records, they are the first family admitted into town after it's founded. So even though they specifically founded the town for Puritans, the first family they lived in aren't actually Puritan. Did you have a question?
Where did the name Dedham come from?
It's the name of a town in England where the majority of the people of this Dedham had come from originally.
Okay.
Similarly, like Plymouth, the people who founded that had gotten here from Plymouth, England, Boston.
Okay.
Those people came from Boston, England. So they had pretty much, if you look New England, everything is named after one of three things. A natural feature, a mangling of the Native American word for it, or the place they came from in England. Like that's everything in everything in Massachusetts is one of those three. So yeah, John Dwight must have really thought highly of Jonathan, though, because he actually witnessed for him at the town meeting. This means that if Jonathan, his wife, or any of his 6 children do anything that's viewed as non-Puritan behavior, John Dwight would be the one held responsible for it. So that's a big step to take that, to do that for someone else. So Jonathan must have been a very upstanding, great guy for John Dwight to have been willing to do this for him.
What would happen to him if Jonathan did something wrong?
Probably exile. He'd be told that he can't live in Dedham anymore, time to move out, or possibly something worse than that, jail time, time in the stocks, depending on the exact crime. Of course, the 10 Commandments are the 10 laws, effectively. So the worst thing you can do is break any of the 10 Commandments, and they're treated equally. Taking the Lord's name in vain and murdering somebody are roughly equal in Puritan society.
Well, what about the person who spoke for him? What happens to that?
Oh, that's what, by John witnessing for Jonathan, it means that both of if any Fairbanks does anything bad, Jonathan will share their punishment.
Oh.
So that it's a big jump to witness for someone else in a Puritan town, right? So, yeah, you're good. So this is the layout of part of the original town of Dedham. It's a little bit jumbled. This is the modern streets overlaid with the properties they had. And you can see how everybody has these sort of strips of property. Everyone who joined the town, or who was allowed to join the town of Dedham, if they were a bachelor, single man got 8 acres, a family got 12. And actually there's some reports in the records, bachelor moves in, gets his 8 acres, gets married, and they give him another 4 acres. So it was very consistent. But interestingly, the acreage was always in one, you see how they're in strips. Your 12 acres would be in a strip, roughly an acre wide and 12 acres long. And you would always be encouraged to build your house as close to the main road as possible. So this street, what we now call East Street, was the main road going through the part of Dedham where the Fairbanks live. And so the Fairbanks house is right next to it, like very close, a little too close actually, which we'll talk about later. And everybody was encouraged to do that. This way, everybody got 12 acres of land, but you were never more than 1 acre away from your nearest neighbor. That way, if there was a fire, they could run to help you, or if you were, your house was attacked by the French or natives, whoever else might be attacking you, you didn't have too far to run for cover. So that was the idea. Everybody gets their 12 acres, but you're never too far from your neighbors. And so just to highlight, this is the Fairbanks property, the original Fairbanks property.
Well, did they have to pay for the property, or did they get it for free?
They just, as far as I can tell, they were pretty much, if they were allowed into town, they were granted 12 acres. But then they were expected to contribute to the town funds on a regular basis. So the town would have gotten this back. And it was partially based on how much land they owned. So they got the land for free, but then they effectively paid taxes on the amount of land they had. So the town did get it back, in a way. Good question. Yeah. So yeah, this is the Fairbanks property. You can see a long stretch there. Some other interesting names. Actually, the biggest one is the Metcalfs. The Fairbanks and the Metcalfs intermarry at least 3 or 4 times over the decades, centuries. The very interlinked town names. And actually, the Fairbanks are a very prominent family. And there's a lot of them. And so they end up, at some point or another, they pretty much marry and eat all of these families in some way or another. So Fairbanks are very involved in Dedham in several ways. So this is the original house, well, part of it. So the red outline is the original house, the part that was built in 1637. We think it was either built by John Roper or John Kingsbury. Now, why do we know why do we think it's these guys? Well, as I said, Jonathan and Grace are from the West Riding of Yorkshire, and they built houses in a very particular way there, and this house is not built that way. It's built the way they built houses in East Anglia, which is just, so East Anglia is just northeast of London, and West Riding of Yorkshire is almost to Scotland. So we're talking completely opposite ends of England. And so the house is not built the way Jonathan, if Jonathan were to build a house, which that's not his skill set, he wouldn't have. But if he were to build one, he wouldn't build it this way. This style of architecture, like I said, East Anglian. And there were 3 house builders in the Dedham area from East Anglia. But one of them was building the town hall in 1637, when we know the Fairbanks House is built. And then when he was almost done with it, he fell off the roof. So there's no way it's that guy. But these other 2, we don't have exact records of what they were doing in 1637, but they were the right kind of house builders to have built the Fairbanks House. So one or both of them built the frame of the house, the wooden frame. And unfortunately, we do not know who the mason was, but we do know that the clay was locally gathered and locally kilned. And the chimney, the center of the house, you can see how big it is. We estimate there are 40,000 bricks in the chimney. And there are 3 fireplaces off of the one chimney. The largest, actually originally, you can see this fireplace here. This used to be about that wide and probably this far into the chimney. The main fireplace in the hall, which was the acted as kitchen, dining room, living room, was originally massive, as much as 6 feet wide, 4 feet deep. Huge fireplace. Late 1700s, they shrunk it down and added an oven, like you see here. But yes, there's the big one in the kitchen, or the hall as they would call it, another one in the parlor, living room, and then a third one on the second floor in the bedroom. So that's the chimney. Around that, the frame of the house, built by those master carpenters. There are no nails holding the frame of the house together. It's all entirely what's called mortise and tenon, or tongue and groove construction. So the various beams and posts in the house are hand carved so that they fit together, interlocking like pieces in a puzzle, and then they're held together with wooden pegs. Question?
Was the reason for that because of the expense of the nails?
That was part of it, yeah. So there's a few reasons to do it this way. So one, nails are expensive, but they also rust. And a rusty nail rots out the wood around it and weakens your structural integrity. So the less nails you can use, the better. But also, they used green wood to build the house. They didn't age it or season it before they used it. So what that would mean was that the wood would, after they had already put it together with the intricate interlocking joints, the wood would dry, and as it dried, it shrank. And if it shrank with the joints already put together, they would bind together incredibly tightly, which is a very big part of why the house is still standing, is those very interlocking, very secure joints. The house has settled very unevenly over the years. Parts of the house have dropped a solid foot more than other parts of the house. If it hadn't been so well put together, it would have literally ripped itself apart over the years. But thankfully it was well put together. So yeah, this is the original portion of the house. The red outline was built 1637. This back section here, what we call the lean-to, was added in the 1650s. It's called a lean-to because it's literally leaning on the side of the original house. Lean-tos were very popular additions in the 1600s because they're cheap and easy. You build a wall, you build a roof, literally lean it on the side of the old house and you're done. Question?
Can you give us an orientation towards East Street and...
Oh yeah, so they built, all houses would be built with the front door facing due south. So the front door is right here, this is south. East Street is right here. And again, that is the original road through town, and that's still there. And so it's a little too close to the house, like I said, but there's not much we can do about it at this point. So yeah, front door is always facing due south. So part of the lean-to is this large sloping roof, which we'll see a picture of later. And that's intentional. In addition to being easy, it meant that the north winds that would blow in the winter months are going to go, instead of hitting the side of the house, they're going to go up and over the roof. It's really an incredible design. And actually, even the way what the house is built out of is impressive. The frame of the house is solid oak, mostly white oak with a little red mixed in. Walls, floors, and ceilings are pine. And then the exterior is really interesting to me. The clapboards on the outside, the early shingles. On the south and north facings, the shingles or clapboards are cedar, because those are the facings that bugs like. Bugs hate cedar wood, and we still use cedar shingles today because it's bug resistant. On the west and east sides, those clapboards are oak because those will get the worst weather, and you want something that's resistant and tough to handle that incoming weather. Do you have a question?
Yeah, did anybody look at the design of the house at the time and copy it?
Sort of. I mean, if you're from East Anglia and you build a house, this is pretty much what you're going to build. There's sort of a very, you either build so it's this over, so one room with one chimney, or you build the double like this with the chimney in the middle. That's the way you build in East Anglia.
I guess what I'm saying is the folks looking around at the Fairbanks home and going, boy, that's a nice structure. I think I'd like to try that. Did anybody in the Dedham community try that?
Likely, yeah. I mean, it was recognized as a sturdy structure fairly early on, and other people would have probably tried to copy it. But this is, I should note, this is in the 1600s. This is a huge house.
Yeah.
Actually, based on tax records from the mid-1600s, this is the second largest house in Dedham. The magistrate is the only guy with a bigger house. So most people couldn't afford to copy this exactly, but the ones that could probably would have, yeah. It's a very sturdy way to build a house.
Why is it the original part of the house, surrounded in red, doesn't have a bedroom in it?
Oh, well, so that's a good question. The original part of the house, this is only the first floor plan. It has 2 floors. So this room, the parlor, what's labeled here is the living room. The parlor acts as your entertaining space where you entertain guests, but it is also the master bedroom. Jonathan Grace's bed would be in there. And then on the second floor, over the kitchen or the hall is a workshop where Jonathan would build his spinning wheels. And then over the parlor is the children's bedroom. All 6 children share one bedroom. Some other people in Dedham that they would have interacted with. John Houghton made this chest. This is sort of the pride of our collection. This chest we know was built in the 1640s for the Fairbanks family. That makes it the oldest confirmed object in the house. The way we confirmed it is this center panel. This design on this is very distinct, possibly unique. In fact, it's very rare because it's done freehand, no stencils or guides. That's very rare in 1600s wood carving. And this picture doesn't really do the chest justice. It's a beautiful piece of work.
What wood is it made of?
The frame of it is oak and those panels are pine. Because it's very hard to do detailed carving like that in oak, so the paneling's pine. But it's still really, if anybody here's familiar with woodworking, that center panel is done with what's called stippling. So in other words, instead of carving or cutting off parts of it, it's very slowly dented one tiny pinpoint at a time. It's a very complicated way to make a chest. So John Houghton was a woodworker. He was a wood joiner. Remember, Jonathan's a wood turner. So even though they're both working with wood, they have completely different skill sets. Jonathan wouldn't know how to make a chest, and John Houghton wouldn't know how to make a spinning wheel. The Fairbanks got this from Houghton sometime in the 1640s, possibly a trade. Houghton might have gotten the spinning wheel, the Fairbanks got the chest. We're not really sure. The other interesting family interaction, like I said before, the Metcalfs are very intertwined, that's the word I'm looking for, with the Fairbanks. Particularly in the form of a girl named Martha Pidgey. So Michael Metcalf Sr., his wife passed away, and so his oldest son was Michael Metcalf Jr., who married Mary Fairbanks. this oldest daughter of the Fairbanks family. So they're already connected. And then Michael Metcalf Sr.'s wife passes away, and he remarries a woman named Mary Pidgey. And between the two of them, they end up with like 18 children. Because like, yeah, he's got 10, she's got 8. They end up with 18 kids. So they have a little too many. And by this point, most of the Fairbanks children have moved out. And a lot of your household chores are done by your young children. But now the Fairbanks don't have any kids, and the Metcalfs have too many. So as was a fairly common practice back then, the Metcalfs effectively loan the Fairbanks a child. And that's Martha Pidgey, who grows up. She's like 5 years old when they give her over to the Fairbanks, and she is raised in the Fairbanks house. I mean, my Metcalfs are only 2 doors down. It's not like she's far away from her family, but she's effectively raised as the Fairbanks. And in fact, when she gets married, she's listed in the town records as Martha Fairbanks, rather than Martha Pidgey. So I don't think they were ever officially adopted her, but they effectively did. So a little bit about the Fairbanks that owned the house before we start getting into more of what the house looks like. So 8 generations of the Fairbanks family lived in the house over the course of 267 years. And the house became a museum in 1904, so it's been a museum for 113 years. So a total of 380 years. And it is still owned and operated by the Fairbanks family today. The board, who are my bosses, are all Fairbanks family members. So very briefly, to talk about who lived in the house, Jonathan and Grace leave the house to their oldest son, John. John leaves the house to his son, Joseph, who leaves the house to his son, Joseph, who leaves the house to his son, Joseph, because we're really creative with names back then. Third Joseph doesn't want it, sells it to younger brother Ebenezer. Ebenezer leaves the house to his son, Ebenezer. And Ebenezer Jr. is where things get kind of messy. He makes some mistakes. He's a good guy, everybody liked him, but he's not very good with finances or with being a farmer. Unfortunately, he's a professional farmer. So he makes some bad investments. He tries out a few crops that don't work, overexpands the family property. So under his dad, Ebenezer Sr., the Fairbanks owned about 100 acres in Dedham. Junior expands that to 185 acres. Yeah, so he kind of overdoes it, yes.
Time frame?
This is all right around 1800, give or take. 1790, 1810 or so is when Ebenezer Jr. is in charge. And thank you, that's a good point. So Junior makes some mistakes and kind of ruins the family fortune for the branch of the family living in the house. Oh, I should note, back up to the top here. So you have Jonathan and Grace had 6 kids, John, George, Mary, Jonas, Susan, and Jonathan Jr. As was a rarity back in the 1600s, all 6 of those kids grew up to be adults and have children of their own, and all 6 family lines still exist today. There were actually an estimated tens of thousands of Fairbanks descendants in the United States. And actually, chances are any Fairbanks you have ever met or heard of in the United States is a member of this Fairbanks family. With one exception, unfortunately he's the famous one, Douglas Fairbanks. Douglas Fairbanks, the actor, not his real last name. He does have a connection though. The woman that would eventually be his mother was married to a Fairbanks, but unfortunately Mr. Fairbanks passed away before they had any kids. She remarried a guy named Ullman. With Mr. Ullman, she had 2 sons. But Mr. Ullman turned out to be a jerk, and she got a divorce. Didn't want her sons named after their awful father, so she legally had their names changed back to her prior husband's name, Fairbanks. So he's not biologically connected to the Fairbanks family, but he is sort of connected. So that's Douglas Fairbanks, the silent era film actor, and then his son, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., was big in the 40s. Douglas Fairbanks Jr., though, had 3 daughters, so the name didn't, that sort of false Fairbanks, didn't carry on. And so we can be sure that other than the 2 of them, all the Fairbanks are the real Fairbanks. Back to these guys. So Ebenezer Jr., having messed things up a little, 3 of his daughters, Prudence, Sally, and Nancy, never get married. They have no money for a dowry, and at this point, the Dedham Fairbanks family is viewed as eccentric, to put it nicely. And so nobody wants to marry into the crazy Fairbanks family. So the 3 of them end up spinsters, old and married. And they lived together in the Fairbanks house for most of the 1800s, actually. The Fairbanks do tend to be really long-lived. It's a very sturdy family. Since the three of them never get married, they never have any kids, so they leave the house to their niece. One of their brothers, Joshua, did get married and have some kids. His youngest was named Rebecca. Like her aunts, Rebecca never gets married, so they leave the house to her. Rebecca is the last one to live in the house, moving out in 1904. Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you where we are in time.
Oh, yeah. So 1904 is when Rebecca moves out. She gets the house from her aunts, 1880s or so. So she's in the house for a really long time on her own. Another question?
There's an old story in Hyde Park where Ethel Barrymore was married at the Most Precious Blood Rectory in 1909. And it was done under real secret. No one knew what was happening except a very close portion. And the article states that they went to the Fairbanks, the Fairbanks were friends of hers. So she went to Dedham, I guess. And then later that day, later that night, she came back to the rectory for a party she married the Coles family, which is the, do you have any stories about that particular element?
No.
This is published, so that's why I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's, well, I think the Barrymores and the Hollywood Fairbanks would have known each other. And Douglas Fairbanks, even though he's not biologically connected to the Fairbanks family, did have interactions.
She was doing a play in Boston, was staying somewhere locally, and then after she was married, she went to, according to the article, Dedham, to see her friends, the Fairbanks.
Well,
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to look at that.
By this point, the house is already a museum. So if she's seeing any of her friends who are Fairbanks, they're living elsewhere.
Well, that was my point, yeah.
So, it could be the Hollywood Fairbanks or the real ones elsewhere in Dedham, but so there are still a lot of Fairbanks living in Dedham. Like I said, the board is entirely Fairbanks family members. A lot of them live in Dedham or the surrounding towns. They're still very present in the town of Dedham and throughout Massachusetts. Actually, there are Fairbanks in all 50 states. I wasn't sure about Hawaii, and then some Fairbanks from Hawaii showed up last year.
Ariana Fairbanks. Ariana Austin Fairbanks.
Oh, yeah? She's from Hawaii?
Oh, yeah, the old missionary one.
Oh, yeah. And then we'll talk about Fairbanks, Alaska in a bit. Actually, can you slide? So there is one dark moment in the family's history. Part of what added to that feeling that the Fairbanks were crazy or eccentric. Ebenezer Jr.'s youngest brother, Jason Fairbanks, was tried, convicted, and hanged for murdering a girl named Elizabeth Fales. We're not actually sure if he did it. He was convicted with evidence that the modern court of law would never find somebody guilty. But it was 1801. An attractive young girl had been murdered. Everybody was out for blood. Somebody had to be held responsible. They picked Jason. It is possible he did it. He was there. He did have some issues, but it was never actually proven that he did it. But anyway, Ebenezer Jr., the guy I was talking about before, who ruined the fortune, part of the problem was that when his brother was put in jail and sentenced to hang, Ebenezer Jr. was so convinced his brother was innocent that he and a bunch of his friends broke Jason out of jail. And they ran him to the Canadian border, got to the edge of Lake Champlain, they're waiting for a ferry to cross, and the bounty hunters looking for Jason's $1,000 bounty catch up with him, bring them back here to Dedham. Ebenezer and his buddies all spend a couple months in jail for the jailbreak, and Jason is the execution is carried out. Kind of a dark moment, not just for the Fairbanks, for the whole town of Dedham. Dedham has roughly 4,000 people living in 1801. 10,000 people show up for Jason's hanging.
In Dedham?
In Dedham, yeah.
Wow.
He's hanged on the Dedham Green. And so it's actually the best attended event in Dedham history to that point. Did you have a question?
No, I just got exactly where is the green today?
It's still there.
What street?
So there's a little green next to the church. That's not it. If you keep going down that street, there's a triangle of grass with roads all over it.
Yeah.
That's the green. So it was mostly used for training the local militia, but it's also where they hanged Jason.
I just said it was on Boulevard.
Okay. That's sort of the dark point in the Fairbanks family history.
Was that Jason? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jason Fairbanks.
Was he looked upon?
Long yes.
Was he looked upon as mentally defective?
attractive person.
Possibly. Okay, so the, oh yeah, so she's actually been researching Jason, so I'll let her tell
Okay,
us.
so I'm gonna take over for a minute, sorry. So this is, since I got there, this is my thing, this whole story. So just to give you the brief rundown. So we know, according to most of the people, the friends and the peers of Jason and Elizabeth and Betsy Fales, they are young in love, they care about each other. Of course, in the court transcripts, Betsy's family is like, oh, they hardly even knew each other, but all their friends said they were in love and they wanted to be together. Jason, however, had smallpox as a child and was treated with mercury. So his right arm is completely unusable, and he's very weak, he gets headaches very easily, he can't do any physical labor. And so Betsy's parents do not like him as a suitor for her, they don't approve of him. And so there it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing, the parents don't want them together. So what we know is, Jason had borrowed a penknife from a friend, and we know that the two of them made plans to meet in a field, Mason's Field, on a Monday. The next thing we know, Jason shows up at Betsy's parents' house, covered in blood and wounds, saying Betsy needs help. Betsy's father and uncle rush to the field, where they find Elizabeth, Betsy, with multiple stab wounds, her throat cut quite deeply. She's unable to speak, but she lasts for about 20 minutes before she expires with them there. She does indicate she knows who did this to her, but she doesn't pinpoint any specific people. So, here's where things get weird, because it was just her and Jason. What could have happened, right? Jason almost dies from his wounds. He's a terrible stab wound in his stomach. But when he recovers, he's arrested and taken to jail for this. So, according to the defense, so according to Jason's lawyers, the two of them met up and they were both discussing how horrible it was that they couldn't get married. They wanted to be together and they couldn't. And Elizabeth was so upset by the fact that her parents would let them be together that she took the penknife from Jason and inflicted the wounds on herself. And Jason froze up and was kind of like, oh gosh, what are you doing? And then felt so guilty that he hadn't stopped her that he wounded himself. And then wasn't able to, he tried to kill himself, wasn't able to, so then he ran for help. Now, the problem with this is one of Betsy's stab wounds is in the middle of her back. The defense did prove that it was possible for it to be self-inflicted. It was physically possible for her to get her hand back there and do it. Why someone would stab themselves in the back, though? So that was a big piece of evidence that was held against him. According to the prosecution, the two of them met up. Jason tries to force himself on her, to force her to run away to Rentham to get married. So he's gonna rape her, and that way she'll have no choice, but she'll have to go marry him. And when she refuses, he kills her, and then inflicts his own wounds out of guilt. Again, he's unable to complete killing himself, so then he runs for help. So, did he do it? We don't know for sure. It seems likely, because there aren't that many other options, but it was proven she could have inflicted the wounds herself, and there was enough reasonable doubt that no jury today would have convicted. But back then, as Dan said, someone's got to pay for the death of this 18-year-old girl. But so Jason is put into prison, and as Dan said, he escapes and all that. So this is, I hate when people say, oh yeah, Jason killed her, but we don't know that for sure. But back then, Jason was seen, he was pitied because he couldn't do manual labor, he couldn't be a farmer, he couldn't provide for a family. But we don't have any records of him being seen as mentally disabled. However, we know now that the reason his right arm was stiff is because of the mercury he was treated with. One of the symptoms of mercury poisoning is sudden rages and memory loss. And, so could he have possibly gotten, a sudden fit of strength and rage from the mercury poisoning and then not remembered it afterward? That's the thing. It's possible, but that's speculation now, because now we know what mercury poisoning does. Back then, they didn't know. So the question, was he seen as mentally disabled? No, he was not at the time. That seems like a more likely candidate for what happened now looking back on it, but at the time, he was seen as just a boy who didn't get what he wanted and murdered a girl.
Thank you.
So, sorry, I'm trying
So this one, you keep asking questions. This is happens after with anyone else?
Say questions till the end?
I was going to ask
One more.
I was going to ask you the year, the date.
1801, when all this happened.
It's on the document.
So let's talk a little bit more about the house. This is a more architectural plan. So again, you have the original house, 1637. Then you have the lean-to, this portion here, 1650s. The west wing is added, this portion over here is added in the 1690s. And then, so it's just this. And by the 1790s, there are 15 people living in the house, give or take. And so it's a little crowded. So they take another building from another part of Dedham, and they move it over and attach it to make the east wing. And part of, actually, it's Ebenezer Jr. and his wife, and Mary, and their 8 children are the ones that move into this part. So Ebenezer Sr. and Jason and some of Ebenezer Jr.'s other siblings are all still over here when they add this. Somewhere around 1800, they add this little expansion onto the parlor. Makes it a much bigger room. And they add this, it's a cheese closet originally. The family owned 10 or 12 cows. And back then you couldn't keep milk for more than a day or two. If you wanted your dairy to last, you had to turn it into cheese. Proper cheese making takes about 1.5 years though. Excuse me. So you want it cool, dry, and dark the whole time you're aging your cheese. So you make a cheese closet to keep it away from everything else and keep it as cool, dry, and dark as it can. Because if you don't, that's how you get blue cheese. Now the last thing added, we think, was this right here. Because even though this part is for Ebenezer Jr. and his family, the only way into this part of the house initially is a door right here. So Jr. still got to go through Dad's house just to get to his own living room. So he was not okay with that, so he added his own entryway, or mudroom right here. So that's the house as it was in 1800. Slide. So this is the second floor that we were talking about before. So over the parlor is the parlor chamber, acted as a bedroom. Also had a fireplace. So as I said, the main chimney had 3 fireplaces off of it. So the 2 on the first floor and then this one. This is the workshop where Jonathan built spinning mills. Later generations were also woodworkers. Actually, each successive generation is a little less woodworker and a little more farmer. By the time you get to Ebenezer Sr., he's just a farmer, and then Ebenezer Jr.'s a bad farmer. So when they expanded the parlor, they also expanded the parlor chamber, and then both the east wing and west wing have bedrooms above them. What's interesting though is even though all the 3 sections, the main house, the west wing, and the east wing, all have an upstairs, none of them are connected. They each have their own staircase and are not in any way connected to each other. So to get from this room to this room, you'd have to go downstairs, over, and then back up, even though they're right next to each other. That made it was much more efficient, a lot easier to add an addition if you weren't trying to connect them on the second floor, so they just didn't try. Now we got a couple of images of the inside of the house. This is the hall, so this is your kitchen, dining room, and living room. And this is the main fireplace right here. And you can see now it's only this section here, but it used to be this entire rectangle was one large open fireplace. 1790s, they shrink this down because it's more efficient. This will reflect heat out into the room better than a very large fireplace. Shrinking that down lets them add what's called a beehive oven. It's a round-shaped oven. It looks like a beehive, that's why they call it that. And then you can see all the kitchen implements and stuff, and the table, and all that stuff there. So this is the parlor. The first, when you take a tour, this will be the first room you can see. Again, the parlor is the room where we entertain guests. And in fact, it's the only room of the house we would ever allow guests to see. So it's the only room they would have decorated in the 16 or 1700s. But oddly enough, it is also the master bedroom. Jonathan and Grace's bed would have been in this room. So what's the bed doing in the room where we're entertaining guests? Seems a little weird, right? Or maybe even scandalous. It's nothing like that. Fact of the matter is, beds are expensive. In fact, they're the most expensive thing you own in the 1600s. So you would kind of want to show it off if you had a nice bed, right? But they're Puritans. You can't show off. That's un-Puritan behavior. But if the bed just happens to be in the room where people just happen to be visiting you, and oh, they happen to see it, well, that's okay, right? So they sort of accidentally put the bed in a room where people would see it. So that would have probably been somewhere over here. And then of course the chest, that really nice chest I was talking about before, would have also been in there to accidentally show it off. So this is the lean-to, that workshop area I was talking about. Actually this is, so the lean-to is 2 different rooms. All the way back here you can see into the east wing, that section that was added later. So this is, like I said, a workshop. You can see why it's called a beehive oven here. This is the outside of the oven. We saw the door to over there. A couple of these things are very old. So the chest, like I said, is the oldest confirmed thing in the house. We have a few other things. This cupboard, well, it's a tool chest now, but it was originally a cupboard. It would have been in the parlor. Very nice piece of furniture. But years of use wore it out, beat it up. It was no longer nice enough for the parlor. But they're Puritans, waste not, want not. They're not going to throw it out. They bring it into the workshop, add a few things to it. Now it's a toolbox. So, but there's the remnants of the paint and the decorations that used to be on there. And then this pack saddle, I believe, was there since the beginning. Jonathan would have used that and put it on the back of his horse to bring goods into town. This is the east wing again. That we saw a little bit of in the last picture. The newest part of the house, it's only 200 years old. But while we're here, there's a couple of Fairbanks I really like to talk about. They didn't live in the house, but they're very interesting, so we mention them. First off, we have this guy up here, and his invention, the platform scale. Thaddeus Fairbanks and his brother Erastus. Their dad really knew how to name kids. Thaddeus and Erastus owned several companies in upstate Vermont, including a meat packing company, a hemp company, and they also made steam ovens. But they were having trouble weighing the various goods they were selling accurately. So Thaddeus, being a smart guy, decided he was going to build a better scale. So if the platform scale, anytime you've ever used a scale where the weight goes out on like a metal bar, like the scale from your doctor's office, triple beam balance from high school chemistry, anything like that, that is based on Thaddeus' design. So the smallest ones he built were like this one on the mantle, meant for posts. The biggest ones were so large you could ride an entire cart onto the scale and weigh the whole cart at once. These became so popular that they quit all those other businesses they had and started the Fairbanks Scale Company, which still exists today. And briefly, this guy here is Joel Fairbanks. Joel was just 17 years old when he decided he was going to get his portrait done. But he couldn't afford a proper portrait artist, so he hired a local folk artist instead. So we get this delightful, kitschy portrait here. And actually, if one is to look very closely, the folk artist included something that a proper portrait artist would have left out. If you look closely, Joel has a bunch of little zits all over, or pimples all over his chin. A good portrait artist would have just left that out. So he has this unfortunate portrait, but he does have one thing going for him. He had this done in 1818, which makes this the oldest known portrait of a Fairbanks family member. Wow. So he does have that going for him. So a little bit about the end of it as a house and the beginning of it as a museum. So Rebecca, as I said, is our last person living in the house. She builds up a whole lot of debt, and a local contractor buys out her debt and says after a while he realizes she's not paying it back. So he says to her and to the rest of the Fairbanks family, I'm giving you guys a few months to get together all the money Rebecca owes me, and if you can't put it together, I'm going to have to foreclose on the house, tear it down, and make condos. So, yeah. So a group of concerned Fairbanks get together and try to raise the money. Now, at this time, luckily this is right around 1900, when the Boston Brahmins are sort of coming into their own. It's a group of very wealthy Bostonians that like to show off their wealth by giving it to cultural institutions. We're really happy that happened here in Boston. That's why there's so many museums and historic houses and the like in Boston, is because of those Boston Brahmins and them throwing money at anything cultural or historic. So we love them, they're great. So anyway, a pair of them, Mrs. Cotman and her daughter Martha, see this and pretty much donate the entire quantity of money needed to buy the house back. So the Codmans and the Fairbanks family now sort of jointly own the house, And they allow Rebecca to continue living there with the caveat that she gives tours of the house to anybody who comes by to visit. Now imagine, if you will, Rebecca is in her early 80s at this point. She's in her early 80s, and she's told that the only way she can stay in her ancestral home is to give tours of it to complete strangers. Not surprisingly, Rebecca is often described as being rude, cantankerous, around like me. You know what? I would be too.
Sounds like my grandma.
In fact, she's so bad that the family regularly takes ads out in the local paper to apologize for Rebecca's behavior. So eventually the family goes to Rebecca and says, you know what, you're getting up in age and we'd really like to turn this into a museum. It'd be best for everybody if you moved out. No. A little while later they come back. Well, we really think that, you should move out. It'd be really good if we need this house. You should move out. Yeah. Eventually the family has to threaten legal action on Rebecca to convince her that it's time to move out. And she's 84 by this point. And they convinced her, so that's 1904, they convinced her to move out. And actually they had held 2 reunions at the house already by the time they convinced her to move out. It's unclear how willing a host she was for those reunions. But 750 people showed up to the first family reunion in 1902 to Rebecca's house. And there's I'm going to paraphrase, I don't know the exact quote, but she said something to the effect of, they tell me all of these people are Fairbanks, but I've never met any of them.
Did they all sleep over?
Thankfully, I think they all used hotels and stuff around. I don't think she allowed any of them to stay in the house. Maybe a couple of the ones she actually knew, but mostly, they stayed around the area. They eventually convinced her to move out, and that's when it becomes a museum, 1904. So again, we've been a museum for 113 years. So a few interesting things have happened in the house over the years. The first version of Anne of Green Gables that was ever committed to film was filmed in the Fairbanks House. Unfortunately, no prints of it still survive that we know of. If there are any, they're in some private collection hiding away. So all we have left of it is lobby cards like this. That's the only evidence that it ever existed, unfortunately. But it was filmed in the Fairbanks House in the 1920s.
So everyone check your attic.
If you've got old film reels in your attic and you find an Anne of Green Gables, let us know. That'd be great. So unfortunately, Hollywood wasn't the only thing in the house. So in the 1960s, this is the East Wing. In the 1960s, a young man was driving through the intersection right near the house when the brakes on his car failed. And I need to specify, I've met multiple people who knew this, or were friends with this guy, he's still alive, who did this. And so multiple of his friends have taken tours of the house, and all of them insist that I say he was not drunk, he wasn't on anything, he wasn't being reckless, legit, the brakes on his car failed. He was a really good guy, wouldn't have done this on purpose. They all insist I say that, so there you go. Anyway, so the brakes on his car failed. At the time, we just had a wooden fence around the house. He goes clean through the wooden fence, clean through the outside wall of the house, clean through this wall, and comes to rest right in the center of the East Wing. And as you can see, it's one of these giant 60s cars. Right? So they got it actually, and a few weeks ago, somebody who was part of the team that pulled the car out of the house came by and, oh yeah, I remember that. And so they pulled the car out of the house and they repaired it. Now, unfortunately, it was the 1960s and they decided they were going to redecorate in what they felt was historically looking stuff. And rather than actually find historic wallpaper, they just went to the nearest store and bought the oldest looking wallpaper from the local store. So currently the wallpaper in the East Wing, not very accurate, something I'm going to fix, hopefully in the near future. But it's surprisingly hard to take down wallpaper from antique walls, So this is the house as it looked in the late 1800s. So of course we have, thankfully, because it was already considered historic, even when Rebecca's still living there, people are thinking of it as a historic old house. And so some of the earliest photographs taken in Dedham, or anywhere in Boston really, are of the house. It's one of the first things photographers go to as soon as they have a camera. So there's a lot of fantastic old pictures. And you can see dirt road. Here's the wooden fence that guy later would go through. And you can see the elms we were talking about earlier. All those great, huge elm trees. All of them died somewhere between the 30s and 50s, unfortunately. And so that's the late 1800s. And this is from the same angle today. Now we have a road and now we have a stone wall. You see that? So if anybody else's brakes fail, they're going to hit that and hopefully stop there and not go through the east wing. Now the other thing you may have noticed is suddenly there's another building over here. That was added in 1912. The first curator was an interesting guy. His name was Henry Irving Fairbanks. And he was a little eccentric, but he was also thankfully a little wealthy. So he was the first curator and the first president of the board at the same time. Something we don't do anymore. But he convinced them, remember, as the head of the board, he convinced the board that the curator, which also happened to be him, should live on site. And so he was so obsessed with this idea that he forced his family to live with him in a tent on the property while they were building this house. So it was built in 1912, and this is actually a Sears and Roebuck hit house. It was ordered out of the Sears catalog, showed up like a giant IKEA table, and they put it together. And it was built to be the curator's house, and it is still the curator's house today. So Alice and I live there. The first floor is our apartment, second floor is the museum offices. You can't beat my commute. So here's one of the pictures from the first family reunion. As I said, 750 Fairbanks showed up to that. This year we had 110, so still a pretty good turnout, but nothing like that first one. The Fairbanks family is still very dedicated to the house and the museum. There's a lot of, I'd say about a quarter of all the people who visit every year are descendants. But again, there's tens of thousands of them, and it's not hard. I had another slide. Where'd my last slide go? Oops. Did I lose my slide? Wow, that's weird. Okay, well, it just had my contact information on it. And, oh yeah, I was going to talk about Fairbanks, Alaska. Thank you. So one more family member to talk about. Didn't live in the house, but is an interesting guy. Charles W. Fairbanks was Teddy Roosevelt's vice president. He was also the guy Fairbanks, Alaska is named after. So Roosevelt served his first term with no vice president. He was replacing McKinley, who had been assassinated. For his second term, Roosevelt realized he was way too extreme for almost everybody. He needed a moderate to balance out the ticket. He couldn't find anyone more moderate than Charles W. Fairbanks. So the two of them ran together and won, and given their different political views, it's not surprising that they were not particularly fond of each other. To give you an idea, when Roosevelt had already served his 2 terms and Fairbanks was running for president, Roosevelt actually backed his opponent. But before he was vice president, he was a senator from Indiana. And while he was a senator, he was the head of the committee that determined the borders of the then territory of Alaska. Now there's a common trend in the late 1800s when he's doing this. You're founding a new town, you need money. Name your town after somebody important and preferably wealthy. They'll be so flattered that they'll give you all the money. So a group of Alaskans named their town Fairbanks, Alaska, after Charles W. Fairbanks, and by every account I found, he doesn't give them a dime. But the name sticks, and it's still Fairbanks, Alaska today. And actually, he never went to the territory or state of Alaska in his life. Or he never gave them any money either. So that's Charles W. Fairbanks and Fairbanks, Alaska. So I guess now, very briefly, hours, it was going to be on the last slide, the hours were open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. Tours are on the hour, last tour at 4. And we are only open May through October, so you have until the 29th if you want to visit this year, but we'll be open again in May. So, question? When was the land itself broken up into smaller parcels and then given back to the town of Dedham? That's a great question. The history of the property. As I said, Jonathan Brace got 12 acres. By the time their son John's done with it, it's up to 60. By the time Ebenezer Sr. is done with it, he's got 100 acres. Junior expands to 185. Then his three daughters that never move out, Prince Sally and Nancy, part of where they make money is selling off the property, a few acres at a time. And I should note, when it was at 185, that's not one contiguous plot, that's 185 acres. Back then they had no way to convert land to do what you wanted it to, so you had to buy the land that was already the right kind. You want to grow apples, you need high hilly areas. You want to grow flax, low meadowland. You want to grow wheat, something flat and relatively dry. So they own 185 acres spread out around Dedham. And three sisters slowly sell that off, and Rebecca continues the trend. By the time Rebecca is done with it, there are 2 acres left. As I said, Henry Irving, our first curator, independently wealthy, really nice guy, buys the property next door, brings us back up to the current 4 acres that we're on today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, thank you.
Yeah, just a comment, not a question, but St. Johnsbury, Vermont is where the Fairbanks platform scale. There's a beautiful museum there at Fairbanks, and also the library, the Athenaeum. One of the Fairbanks was a patron of the arts, and he put some beautiful artwork in there, and it's all free admission. So if you're up in the Northeast Kingdom, it's worth the trip.
Yeah, absolutely. If you make it to St. Johnsbury, half of everything is named Fairbanks because, so you have Thaddeus, the inventor of the platform scale, his
Governor of
brother
Vermont,
Erastus,
too. Yeah.
who helped him start the company but then became governor of Vermont. And then Erastus' son is Horace Fairbanks, who was also governor of Vermont and the guy who started the Athenaeum.
Yeah.
So that's one's named after him. Yes?
Of the original structure of the house, how much is it still original, and how long will it last before the beams need to be replaced?
It's a good question. Actually, the majority of the interior of the house is the original wood. There's one spot where there's a minor fire and one spot where it rotted out. Otherwise, probably, I'd say like 90% of the frame is the original wood that it was built with. Yes, it's really amazing. So unlike the Constitution, which is still the original ship, but it's only the keel that's always been there, the Fairbanks House is thankfully mostly the original materials. The only thing that the exterior, the clapboards and the shingles, it's unfinished wood, and this is New England. It needs to be replaced every 30, 40 years. But once you're inside, it's almost all original, and most of it's in the original condition. Some of it's having a little trouble, and I'm watching those items, and we have ways to repair it or shore it up or support it. But mostly it's in very good condition, and it should last, as long as I do my job, it should last a few hundred more years. So I had some questions now.
I read a few years back now, it's the oldest property in the United States, and that was determined from a tree that was on the property. And that was only a few years back that I read that.
I'd actually heard that. Oh, maybe. So one thing that did happen a few years back is they did what's called dendrochronology. And that wasn't, it wasn't a tree on the property, it was the summer beam in the hall. Actually, can you see it in the picture of the hall? If you go back up. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can kind of see it. Not really. Anyway, the summer beam is a huge piece of wood that goes across the top of the hall. It's about yay big, and it's from a single piece of white oak. And when they wanted to figure out scientifically how old the house was, they took out a core sample from the summer beam, and they looked at the rings. They looked at the width of the rings, the number of the rings, compared it to weather data, did all this other incredible stuff that I don't really get, but it was Oxford, I trust them. And they figured out that that tree was felled in 1637. And we know that the way they built houses back then, like I think I mentioned before, they used green wood. So if the tree's felled in 1637, that's the year the house is built.
Yeah, so none of the trees outside of the property are from
No,
that
I said elm, and he said oak, so I know I.
Yeah, well, because the elms all died.
Yeah, the elms all died, but that oak
yeah.
tree used for the frame of the house.
And
It was
that's how we
dated
know it's the
1637.
oldest wood frame structure, not necessarily the oldest property, but the oldest wood frame structure in
In the
America.
United States.
In North America, actually.
Yeah.
There's
In North America.
There's
Yeah,
clay
we
stuff
need-
in the Southwest, there's stone stuff in Florida, but
Yeah, so
in
the-
terms of woods.
Yeah, there's Spanish missions in Florida and New Mexico that are made of stone, and then all the Native Americans.
Oh,
That's older. But as far as things made of wood, the Fairbanks House is as old as it gets in the United States.
And
in
the
the
story was true.
Also, if in case everyone's ever driven by the house or familiar with it, you'll notice on the chimney it says 1636.
Yeah.
Up until 10, 15 years ago, when they did the dendrochronology, the house, as far as the family knew, they always thought it was built in 1636.
Yeah, because that's the year that family was admitted to town.
Right, so everyone always assumed that, so then they did dendrochronology, found out they were a year off, but even though it was brought up to the family, do you want to repaint the chimney? They said, no, it's on the postcards, it's on whatever, it said 1636 forever, so even if it's a year off, we're just going to keep the chimney the way it is.
So eventually they're gonna.
Thank you for the beam,
Oh, yeah.
information on the beam, because I figured a tree and they.
Oh, yeah. So did you know?
I just want to make a statement.
Oh, sure.
I think it's so wonderful that people like you and your wife are helping to conserve this, because, we lose so much history every year.
Yeah.
So-called progress, the water in Dedham was 20% lost to arsenic when the Rustcraft car company went elsewhere. And history and progress ideally should live together, but progress often trumps history. And the fact that you both are such able curators of this property, I think we know not only owe you a debt for coming here today, but for doing the work that you do.
It's an honor to be here.